Nadine is among the first Rhodes Scholars of Haitian descent and earned her doctorate in philosophy of education. Author of award-winning informational books, her fiction appears in Haiti Noir, edited by yours truly, and her Pushcart Prize-nominated poetry has been widely anthologized. Nadine's debut young adult novel in verse, When the Mapou Sings, which we are celebrating today and very proudly and happily celebrating. The novel was recently published by Candlewick Press in early December. It draws on Zora Neale Hurston, the famous African-American novelist and anthropologist. This novel, When the Mapou Sings, draws on Zora's fieldwork in Haiti from 1936 to 1937. It also draws on Nadine's mother's family stories and Nadine's own work with Haiti's first Goldman Environmental Prize winner, Chavannes Jean-Baptiste. Nadine's anthology, Earth is a Living Thing, Black Poets in the Natural World, inspired by Christian Cooper, the black bird watcher who was unfairly targeted by the so-called Karen in Central Park. Nadine's anthology, inspired by Christian Cooper, will be published by Chronicle Books. Her illustrated biography of the trailblazing Mexican-American artist Elizabeth Catlett is also forthcoming from Enchanted Lion Books. We're so proud of you, Nadine. We're so happy for you and so glad to be celebrating When the Mapou Sings today. Nadine will be joined in conversation with the equally fabulous Yveline Alexis. Yveline Alexis is a historian of Haitian and Caribbean studies who founded the historical consultant business Our Stories at YvelineAlexis.com. She's the author of the award-winning book Haiti Fights Back, The Life and Legacy of Charlemagne Péralte with Rutgers University Press. The Times Literary Supplement listed this book as a 2021 Book of the Year. Alexis is an associate professor at Oberlin College and Conservatory. Please welcome Nadine and Yveline to this virtual stage for some café à conversation. I wish you all a wonderful time. I'm very proud, very excited for this conversation, and I look forward to what they have to say. Thank you for joining us, and please welcome Nadine and Yveline.
Thank you all. Oh my God, merci en pile. And thank you, Edwidge Danticat. If you're on the Amtrak headed home, Nadine, maybe you could drop where they could buy the book in the chat and I'll pose the first question to you. So I'll always speak. Oh, you cannot minimize Zoom workplace when you're recording this meeting. Forgive me. Okay. I'm always going to speak in Creole first and then I'll translate. So, Nadine, anu parle. So, pou ki sa ou fe Haiti comme setting pour livre When the Mapou Sings? Why did you make Haiti, a setting of your novel When the Mapou Sings?
Well, the main reason is because the characters that intrigued me were in Haiti at the time. So, number one, it came from an idea and from a question that I had. And when I read, so I'd already read Their Eyes Were Watching God many years ago. I read Alice Walker's essay about how she discovered Zora Neale Hurston's, burial place and put that headstone that said Genius of the South. So I was already, I had this idea of what Zora would be doing in Haiti when she was conducting field work from 1936, 1937. But as I started to do my research, what I found is there wasn't much actual documentation of that time period. So her fieldwork notebooks were missing for that time. Her biographer didn't have much information because I emailed her right away, Valerie Boyd, and I really want to recommend Wrapped in Rainbows, The Life of Zora Neale Hurston. I emailed her niece, Lucy Ann Hurston. I think I emailed anybody I could find who could help me, and most of them said the same thing. Well, we know what she went to do, but in terms of what she actually did, there are some kind of gaps. And as soon as there are gaps in history, that's an invitation for fiction in my eyes, or for poetry. So it takes place in Haiti because she was there. And when she was there, she wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God in 6 weeks. She started her memoir, Dust Tracks on the Road, and also wrote Tell My Horse, which is a sort of hybrid fictionalized, let's say, account of her time in Jamaica and in Haiti. It's a non category, it pushes all the genres and stuff. So I don't want to say it's nonfiction or fiction, but let's just say it's about her time in Haiti and Jamaica. And in Tell My Horse, in the epigraph, she mentions a Haitian woman named Lucille who helped her, and she calls her dear friend, and how much she loves her. And also, the last line is something like, I would trust her with the treasury of the US. And I thought, well, that's very strange. I mean, where did that come from? And of course, as I did more research, I knew that, there was the trickster Zora, and I knew that within her own voice, she was telling two stories. And so I started to look back and learn more about the occupation, which is your specialty, and how I got in touch with you, and just trying to figure out what it would have been like for someone living and growing up in that time, and then thinking about the idea of the loophole of retreat. So, the Harriet Jacobs, and the idea that wherever you are, there's always a way that you can make choices on behalf of your own freedom. And that's really where it began. So these are characters, yes, but they're based on real people. Some of the names are the actual people's names. In the novel, Mamzelle is Zora, but she's addressed as Mamzelle. The Siva family appears in many places. So there are characters, and also the person she falls in love with is based loosely on Jacques Roumain, who you know who he is, but we can talk maybe about him a little bit later. So again, it's naturally Haitian because that's its origin. That's where the roots of the story are. And it's exciting because it's an untold or maybe undertold period. I mean, Edwige's novel, The Farming of Bones, is just one of the most amazing reads. If you haven't read it, it is set right before 1937. So it is about that period, set before and during. And it's one of the books that I read that brought me to that period, but I let it sort of gestate a bit. And then when I found out about Zora in Haiti, I just thought, okay, I need to know more. And how come she was so creative in this time period? What was it about her time there that fertilized and made her, have this burst of creativity?
Wow, Nadine, that was such a treasure trove of like, okay. Messy on Peel. And it's interesting because then I asked why Haiti for the setting of your novel. And I was going to tell people I'm not trying to give away the plot, but you engage with Dr. Zora Neale Hurston, the anthropologist. And the question, te me pose li en créole, m'tap mandi kon sa, pou tout moun ki Black Americain, femme avec garçon qui arrivé à Haïti, pour qui ça a choisi Dr. Zora Neale Hurston. So you kind of already answered that question, and I'll ask it in English. I said, not to give away the plot, but Dr. Zora Neale Hurston, the anthropologist who gave us novels like Their Eyes Were Watching God, makes an appearance in your book. Of all the African American women and men who traveled to Haiti historically, why select her? And you sort of answered that question, so thank you, of why she matters. So the third question then is, in Creole. So, auteur, typically, nos conversations avec scolaire, moun ki artiste, moun ki activiste, est-ce que nos conversations avec nan livre? So, Authors are typically in conversation with scholars, artists, as well as activists. Whom are you in conversation with through this novel?
I really like that question because it's two questions to me. You're asking about who am I in conversation with at the time in the setting of the novel, and then also throughout, maybe, throughout different kinds of time periods. So I think of it in two ways. And so for me, as we did our research, I found things that I didn't expect to find, and it's thanks to our work together. I wanted to let everyone know how much Yveline helped me as my historical authenticity reader, but more than that, just as somebody who understood what I was trying to do and helped me open my mind to things that I wouldn't have found on my own, including the documentary, The Forgotten Occupation, Jim Crow Goes to Haiti, which is about and shows you images that I've never seen before. And so those images found their way into the novel. So if you ask about being in conversation with, I'm in conversation with people like Alain Martin, like you, like Edwidge, who was my thesis advisor for the novel. So she was generous enough to act as my advisor when this was a Master of Fine Arts thesis. And she read through my pretty, I think pedantic prose and generously offered comments and also shipped a box of books that she had used to write her own novels. And that is such a precious gift. It was a surprise. And when I received it, I still remember, I get emotional thinking about it now. But being in conversation with people, it's a privilege to be in conversation with you, with her, but also the people of the past. So I think of someone like the real person who was Lucille, whose story we'll never really know. I'd like to be, or I'd like to think that I'm also in conversation with her through this. I'm in conversation with my family, with my mother who passed, and with all of the ancestors. I just, I love the idea of the conversation, but it's such a broad and wide one that it includes many people and probably people that I'm not even aware of. But first, I want to say you, Edwidge. I'm in conversation with you. Zora Neale Hurston. I actually feel that at times she would be sort of tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "What are you trying to do? Don't try to put words in my mouth," which it was intimidating because she's such a well-known figure and has written so well about herself. So, what was it that I was going to bring to it? And what I thought I'm bringing is the perspective of someone watching her from the outside and seeing her as an American coming in. And so both of them are doing this act of othering. And I wanted to, have that as the focus of their relationship. So
Merci un peu, Nadine. That was beautiful. And oh my God, that moment with your advisor mailing you those books, how beautiful.
that was, yeah,
So you need a lot. You need a lot. Okay. So our fourth question was describe our collaboration process for your audience. So expliquer qui je ne te collaboré pour le livre ça. And you kind of touched on it just a little bit. So yes.
yeah. Well, first, I don't know how I even got your name. This is what's, I read your book and I think I just emailed because I loved the book so much and I thought I need to, be in touch with you. And usually that's what I do. If I read something and it moves me in such a way that I want to meet the author, I just, try to be in touch. And I emailed and you responded. And then, I found out that you actually do help people with this. But I'd love to hear what you felt our process was like because, I have a vision of it, but I'd like to kind of hear from you what, are there other people like me who work with you, or how was I different, or was I different, And then I'll tell you what I think.
Sure. Thank you for reflecting that back on me. It was a joy to work with you. I first thought that this was going to be like a graduate student's work that I had to edit on a developmental level. And I'm sorry you all for chewing. My voice is going and I want to cough and I don't want to cough on screen. So I'm chewing a lemon. I got the your I think one of your chapters and I was just like it was breathtaking and I want to talk about that a little bit because your prose is a very lyrical style and inclusive, diverse style that reminds me a lot of Dr. Ntozake Shange who wrote the text um for colored girls who committed suicide when the rainbow isn't enough. Y'all know
Isn't that
the title.
bad? Yeah.
Y'all know the
I
title.
actually played in that. I
Hmm.
performed in that. The
Yeah.
woman in orange. So
And my colleague, Caroline Jackson Smith, she did a production that involved our students of color on campus, and it was absolutely beautiful. It reminded me of Dr. Ntozake Shange, and I was like, who is this Haitian lady? And it was just a joy to work with you and say, "Ooh, I don't think this would happen. They wouldn't have driven a car, it may have been a horse. They wouldn't have access to Dominican Republic in this way, et cetera, et cetera." And then, of course, Dr. Patrick Bellegarde Smith gets involved with, he has just original footage of Haiti during this time from his family genealogical history. And I emailed him real quick. He's like, "Send her to me." I said, "Okay, I will." So it was a joy, and I learned so much about writing from you. And I hope you learned I helped you understand that part of the history. So thank you.
you absolutely did. And thank you for mentioning Patrick Bellegarde Smith, because although I didn't have the opportunity to talk with him, his knowledge permeated and infused, a lot of what I was able to then turn to. And the fact that you immediately had all of these ideas of, okay, look here, have you tried this? And also to tell me about the screening of the Forgotten Occupation, which was through the Haitian Studies Association. That film, I wish more people will see it and can see it, and that it will have a wider distribution. Because I think one story I'm trying to tell, and maybe this is jumping ahead a bit, is just about the ties between the US and Haiti as well. So there are some stories, there are some narratives that are well known, and I think there are some that are not as well known, and there are misconceptions. And I was hoping in this particular story of this particular character to touch on those larger themes as well. So working with you was like nothing I've done before, because you had me digging and looking and questioning, which is wonderful. Because when you would ask me a question about something like that, could they really have done this, traveled from here to there in one day? Then that forced me to come back, and really ground the characters in a life that was plausible at that time, or else I could have been off in fantasy land. I really let my imagination go. And I love the way that you always provided and asked me to look for the context of what was going on. So I started with the characters, and I started with an idea, and I started with the ending in mind, by the way. So I had a sense of where it would go. But as I revised, and after our work together, and after seeing the documentary, it completely changed the course of some of those characters and how much space they took up in the story. So that's thanks to our work.
Messy Nadine. And I got to correct myself. Okay. Professor Caroline Jackson Smith, extraordinaire, says this is Shaki Shange's book, is for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow was enough. And it is what, 90 pages perhaps? Choreo poem just brings us for everything. So yeah, your writing style reminds me of this.
Wow.
So,
Well,
uh-huh.
no, that's a great compliment. I don't, as I said, I know her work. I had the privilege of performing at Oxford, of all places. We performed her play several times, and the audience, from lots of different countries could relate to it. So, I mean, she has that incredible ability to bring people into this emotional space that's very powerful. And that is what I think imaginative writing can do. So,
No, absolutely. So that brings us to our last question, and then we'll open it up for our congregation here, our community. So the question is, this makes me reflective of my sister, Dr. Geda Nicola, just logged on. I was 10, and Gerda would put books by Dr. Mildred D. Taylor, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison in my hands. And that's how I fell in love with Black women as the authority. Not even fiction, it just resonated. I came of age reading these women's stories. So thank you, Dr. Marie Gerda. But there's something delicious when Haiti, our homeland, is represented in a constructive way. And we know that the great Dr. Gina Athena Ulysse invited us to have new constructions of Haiti with her seminal multilingual in Creole, Francais, and English work, Why Haiti Needs New Narratives. So people like me who came up in grad school, it was always pertinent to me to respect that as like I'm going to write and talk about Haiti in a constructive way, and Haitians like, yes, we're beautiful, yes, we're intelligent, yes, we're fine, etc. We are high achieving people, but we also have some challenges, and I would only do this in a constructive way. If you're gonna talk negative about Haiti, we don't need to have a conversation. But I've learned from some of these great people. So the question is, how have you, through this novel, offered us a new narrative of Haiti via your Haitian voice and your debut novel? So Nadine, bear with me, okay? Tendi sa na Creole.
Mhm.
So, gon bagay ki bon an bouche, lè moun ap pale de Haiti non fasyon ki konstruktive. So nou konen avèk liv ki anthropology artist Dr. Gina Atina Ulysse ekri ya, nan liv li pou ki sa Haiti bezwen nou narrative ke l'ekri avèk Dr. Nadev Mena en fransè, Dr. Yveline Touyo en kreol, epi li imprese apan elev, fok nou toujou pale Haiti non fasyon ki konstruktive. Ki jan fè ke, ou mèm ou fè sa, ou nan lin sa, kote wap ofre an nou narrative pou Haiti avèk vwa pa ou nan liv sa. Ooh, that was a mouthful, Nadine.
It's a great question, and thank you also for putting it, in the context of other stories, of other narratives. I mean, we know, all of us know the negative narratives because those are constantly in our face. In fact, I think today Politico said one of the biggest lies of the year had to do with us, and we know what that is. So it's not even a question of new narratives for me. It was just a question of saying, I've heard enough of the misconceptions, the lies, um, and the viciousness of it and the constant drumbeat of it, and then the return of it. So to have the return of it, so I was writing this before all of this happened, but it was still there. As I was growing up, I remember people blaming Haitians for AIDS and the Red Cross not accepting donations from specifically Haitians, which, they later apologized for. But if you think about that, it's kind of mind-blowing. So at home, I always had a positive sense of our history because my mother and father made sure that we knew that. They surrounded us with that. So kind of entering the home, it was like we were wrapped up and felt very comfortable in ourselves. But I also knew that as soon as I stepped out of that, there were people who'd be questioning and people, who would ask or not ask, but even say the most ignorant things. So it was up to me to try to, if you can, take that sort of energy and turn that and transform that. And that's, if I'm doing anything, I wouldn't say that it's a new narrative, but it's taking what I experienced and trying to create something from that. And that's the new part. So, one of our writing teachers often said, every story has already been told. It's not the story that's the new thing. It's your particular vantage point and perspective and your desire to follow that to the end. So, this story took a lot of time to research, as you know, but it also took a lot of time for me to let go of that and give myself permission to let the imagination take over. Because after a while, I felt shackled to the facts because, well, no, it's not it's that I wanted to get everything right. So I would go back and I'd check each date. And, so as much as possible, the history part of a fact-based novel, this history is correct. But what I've done is imbue the characters with Lucille, especially, has the temperament and personality of my great grandmother. And she would be the courageous person that I wish I could have been at her age. And to me, she's a character who is ideal because she brings together the growing up, the questioning of the world, with meeting someone like Zora Neale Hurston, who would already have been an imposing presence. You know, she was in her full glory at that time from the Harlem Renaissance, and she comes in, and in her past, she had worked as a domestic. She'd had 8 years that are unaccounted for still, that people wonder what happened. She was able to shave 10 years off her real age in order to attend public school in Baltimore. So I have these two incredibly interesting people facing each other. And what are they thinking about each other? And then in what direction? And how does that change both of their lives? So that's how she enters Lucille's life. And I think, the question of a new narrative, every story we tell, if we're honest and true to ourselves, will be a new story because it's us telling it. So even if we retell a story, in some sense, I feel I'm retelling stories my mother told me, but it's been transformed through what I've experienced, through our work together, through reading Edwidge and other, Haitian women writers. So that's kind of the new part of the new narrative. What I hope is that people will want to know more about this period of time, and that maybe they'll be interested in learning more about things like La Voix des Femmes, the nascent movement, women's movement in Haiti that I didn't know about until I started researching this. Found their magazine, thanks to you as well. Found that copy of a very special issue, and that found its way into the novel. And that again is thanks to you. So yeah, I don't know if that's a new narrative, but it's the exploration of your ideas, also listening to your characters and being willing to dwell in uncertainty that can lead you to exciting places when you're writing fiction. Oh,
No.
sorry, one more thing.
Mhm.
One thing that I would say might be new is that this is a historical verse novel. So historical verse novel, you take poetry, some of the elements of poetry, and you set it within history. So the book is actually written in poems that are connected. The poems should be able to stand on their own, but they also have to move the story forward. So those are two opposing things, because poetry often asks us to slow down and savor each word, whereas narrative asks us what's next, what's going to happen. And so writing a historical verse novel is taking things that are usually, opposing forces and trying to keep them working together.
Come on, Nadine, with that great education. Oh my God. Ooh, historical verse. I was going
Historical.
to say thank you also for talking about La Voix des Femmes, and shout out to Dr. Grace Sanders
Yeah,
Johnson, who gave us that book
a wonderful book.
about Haitian women's history during
Mhm.
the invasion period and beyond. So
Love
thank you
Black
for that.
person. Love that book.
Yeah. All right, so this was all our coffee conversation. So let's open it up to our community here. I see a couple of questions in the chat. So Dr. Sheriff asked, will you please share more of your reading history? What has informed your literary voice? So, sou te kapab ba nou an lis de sa ou te li pou iswa sa, epi ki sak impresyone, inspire, voix litera ou?
I'd be happy to share, and what I can do is email this to Yveline because I have 10 pages of sources that informed this. There's just so much reading. So for anyone who asked, this question of what do I need to do to become a writer? Well, the first thing is read, and I've been reading since a very young age, and I started reading um, in Canada, where we first lived in Montreal. So I first started reading in French and, hearing Creole, of course, all around me in the house. And then I learned English in Ontario. And it was a very sink or swim method. It was a very sort of brutal method at the time, especially because there was a lot of tension between the Anglophone and Francophone communities. So the reading that I first did was poetry. It was poetry in French. Um, it was simply because it was the book that I found on the bookshelf in, our study. There were other books there. Some were history. In fact, a lot were history, a lot were poetry. And maybe that's why I ended up writing a historical verse novel, is I love history and I love poetry. But I loved reading biography. That was always a big, I loved reading essays. So it wasn't only fiction that informed me. Of the fiction that I read, I was, of course, deeply influenced by Edwidge, everything that she's written, both fiction and nonfiction. Um, the poetry, I would say Danielle Legros-Georges. I love her poetry, and I really encourage everyone to read her if you haven't had a chance to. Nonfiction, everything, including your book. And, there are so many. It's, again, I have a list, a long list, but those are the things that come to mind right away. And of course, Zora Neale Hurston, her work, because she has such an interesting place now in the canon. But to remember that there was a time where she was obscure, and there was a time where, when she was trying to get published, she couldn't even get responses from the editors. So I want to just remind people that her final unfinished novel is going to be published on January 7th, which is, I believe, her birthday, and she would have been 100 and something years old. And this unfinished novel is about Herod the Great. And she tried and tried to pitch this novel to editors, and nobody was interested. And now it's finally coming out. And Dr. Deborah Plant is the person who's bringing it out, who brought Barracoon into the world as well. So.
You, Nadine. Dr. Patrick Sylvain, since you have your hand raised, please go forth.
Hi, thank you so much. So I again, it's a wonderful, wonderful work. I have it, sort of with me. Uh, so I would like for you to perhaps read two poems, and I will tell you which one, if it's okay. And then it just a brief clarification. So as a literary critic, I think, sort of we're mixing the word narrative with story, because
Yeah.
narrative have a very, very specific sort of meaning. And then the other thing I would say is, when I was a member of the Darkroom Writers Collective, in which Daniel Legros-Georges was, Ntizaki Shenge was one of our mentors. Um, so
Okay.
so
May I ask you a favor? Would you be willing to read those poems that you are talking about? I would love to hear your voice reading the work
okay,
that you
so
wrote.
how about I read one and you read one?
Okay,
All
okay.
right, so
You tell me.
I will read Still Lost on page 60,
Okay,
and then if you could read Watched on page 250.
250. Okay.
All right. So Still Lost. When I was at the section chief's house, I wanted Fifina's hand to be the one pulling back the curtains. I wanted her to see me come out and escape. But I knew from Mapou's song that she wasn't there, even though she was stolen too. Stolen by the section chief to be his outside wife. His mother wouldn't want Fifina as her son's official wife, even with her light skin and silky hair. She'll always be the daughter of a Bosch who helped the Kako, who would not help him climb the ranks in the army. Mapou led me here. I pray another dream will lead me to her.
Wow, what an honor to hear your voice speaking my words. First of all, thank you. And can I ask why you were particularly drawn to hearing that poem? Oh, you're muted, I
You're
think.
muted, Patrick.
I mean, it's the issue of the Tonton Macoute, right? It's how power is being used, but also the notion of um, caste by color, right? And how in a very poetic and subtle way, you're giving us what is lost into the sort of like from the personal point of view, but it's done again. This is what I like about your poetry. It's not didactic, right? It's poetical, um, and it's done in a way that is really, really nice. I mean, of course, it's the entire book. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because one thing that happened in transforming this from prose and trying to create a novel in verse is I had to give up my tendency to show off the research and the history, because I had this idea I have to show everything, I have to tell everything, I have to get everything in there. And what I started to do was sculpt, so sometimes maybe even showing by omission, if you want. So things are being shown and I'm trying to tell the story, but I'm not giving every aspect of it. And you're absolutely right to say that, in terms of talking about the history and the class divides and the colorism and all of it, all of those were in my mind. And then what I thought is, okay, I'm telling the story of Lucille, and how does her life collide and encounter these forces? But how does she find her way through all of this, through her own action, through also through community, through the love that she has for the natural world, for her country, the love that she has for her family, the love that she has for her friend Fifina, and then for Orest. And then eventually another kind of love develops, but I won't give away that part of it. But thank you for reading, and thank you for reading my book. I'm so excited. Wow.
Mm. Nadine, we're gonna
Well, I can't
Nadine,
follow up that,
yeah,
but
I was gonna say, Nadine, but we can close you out by reading this the quote, but I do
oh
want to get
no,
to
because there might be other
there are
questions.
actually other questions. So I want to get to those and then you can when we
Okay.
end.
Okay.
So Belle Espinal, Oberlin alum, Fab student asked, it's in English, y'all can read it, so let me just translate it in Creole. Merci pour conversation fantastique là. Dis-nous de background éducation ou et puis qui genre academia formé ou.
Um, so I would say it was definitely my education started, if you want, I mean, in kindergarten or whatever the smallest grade is in Montreal. But the sense that we had there was of a community, a very strong community. So even though we might be there might be only a few of us in the class, and then the rest were French Canadian, there wasn't that sense of otherness as much because they were trying to create a community based on language, you know. So the French at the time were trying to separate themselves from the rest of Canada, and Quebec was going to be its independent country, the French separatist movement. And so they welcomed Francophone immigrants. So in that sense, the education was, of course, there was no, there was no Black history, there was nothing like that. But there was a sense of inclusiveness based on language. So when we moved to Ontario, that was entirely gone. And we were the only Black family in our town. There was one African student at the university, but that was it. And it was the first time I heard the N-word spoken to me was in Guelph, Ontario. And there, the education was much more Anglophone and I felt much more excluded immediately because of the language, but also because, you know, we were made to feel that Black was something undesirable, which we hadn't felt before. So in the same way that Zora Neale Hurston, she has an essay where she said, I, looked in the mirror and I saw this wonderful, I never thought of myself as this or that. Well, it's the same way that every person of color, there is probably a moment where the outside world tries to tell you what you are. But if you have a conception of yourself that's strong, you're doing battle with that. So I don't know if this is really answering the question of education, but what I wanted to say is that the struggle of finding a place where this kind of story was a story that would be welcome. Even when I was at Oxford, I was told there wasn't such a thing as Black women writers. I mean, by a person who's supposedly educated. So, I've encountered lots of interesting things along the way in academia. Thankfully, I encounter people like Dr. Yveline Alexis, but there have been people who definitely question the value of what we do. And I'm just glad to see that things like the Haitian Studies Association and lots of other groups, but in particular that group, because I'm a member, they make sure that this is not going to keep happening. When I was growing up, it was much more haphazard. So it was through story, through proverbs, through reading history that my mother would give me that I really got an education about Haitian history. But I find that even now, a lot of people aren't aware of the ties between Haiti and the US. So maybe sometimes people will know about a particular time in history, but they'll say, I wasn't aware that even back, way back then, we were connected in a very, very close way. And that's maybe part of the new narrative you were talking about, that I want to make sure people are aware. And if we know those ties, that we can then understand better what's going on now and how it's affecting people now, and prevent the same kind of scapegoating that just keeps repeating itself in a cycle. So I don't know if that really answered the question. Whoever asked that question, I hope that answers your question, but
They're thumbsing you up, and I appreciate that you name our names, so we won't say the names of people who come for us. Period. Dr.
nope.
Geda Nicolas, Marie, would you like to pose your question?
Thank you so very much. First of all, let me just say congratulations, Nadine, and congratulations to my dear sister friend for this conversation that is so needed. I have to like confess, I have a personal crush. I have like a girl crush on Nadine. So I just want to put it out there so everybody knows where this question is grounded from as well. I just want to say a special thank you to you for this book on Mapou Sings, because not only there's like an excellent children's book that talks about the journey of the Mapou that I gave to a colleague friend of mine who has kids in Atlanta, and they had never heard of the word Mapou, right? They don't know what Mapou is, and they don't know the significance of the word Mapou. So there's a way that the name of it itself is continuing the knowledge and understanding of what that Mapou tree stands for, and why when we say somebody's significant past, we say Mapou tombe jodia, go Mapou tombe jodia, because it is of the significance of that. What I wanted to put my camera in and ask a question related to the novel, which I am getting my copy, Patrick. So stop being like, Patrick, stop showing off. Patrick, oh, Patrick, oh, stop showing off, Nadine, comme ça, stop showing off. The question that I wanted to ask is related, Nadine, to what we are planning for next year, which many people don't know, the significance of April 10th for us. Most people shows up and the April 10th come and nobody thinks about what that means. But April 10th, 2025 for us next year is the 75-year anniversary of the first Congress, the first Haitian Women Congress in Gonaive, that took place April 10th, that enabled women, Haitian women in country, to vote at the national election. So I say this to say, and I know we are planning a whole anniversary workshop and plan in Gonaive in next year. And I really hope that this is going to be the thing that brings you to Haiti. Honestly, I really hope Like, you know, like you're gonna come to Haiti with the book, you know, and
we're good. Yes.
You know, yeah, okay, with the book. But I wanted to ask the questions about the linking of this sort of like there's this story of Lucille's and the women and friends and sisterhood that is a part of that, and the linking of that to this woman Congress movement also that is such a significant part in ways that you see that lien, la créole, connexion ça qui gagne entre livre là, mesdames ça yo qui n'en fait partie de histoire et avec histoire historiquement 75 anniversaire et premier congrès ça qui pral vin là à 2025 là. Je souhaite que tout pas gen moun là pral oublier 10 avril. But que so if you're writing about women and you're focusing on women and women literature, all of us here should know April 10th, right, as a significant moment in history. So with that, I just would love to hear your thoughts about how you see with the linkage, you know, between. Thank you so much again.
First of all, thank you. And no, I didn't know it. So thank you for bringing this again, you know, these parts of history to my attention, to our attention, and for holding this Congress, because this creates new narratives. The very fact that you're doing this, that you are bringing people together and you're doing it in a way that is saying, look, everybody sees these headlines about Haiti. When is it in the news? It's always when something negative happens. It's always in terms of catastrophe. There are people who can't even imagine that, you know, someone is trying to live a normal, quote unquote, life because they have not imagined that people in Haiti even have inner lives. So when you deny people inner life, if you see that they have their own dreams, their own ambitions, their own you know, solutions even to problems, then you are denying them humanity. So that's, you know, at the basis of that. And we know that for many, you know, we can go back for so long that women have been denied the very essence of having autonomy and an inner life, that they were, you know, often traded like property and treated like property. And within the book, there are different, if you see, there are women who suffer sort of, I don't want to say suffer, there are women who go through different experiences and who have the resourcefulness to transform those experiences, but they're in different situations. And what I wanted to do was show as much of that as possible without making it feel like it was a lesson, you know, that I'm telling you and teaching you. What I wanted to do is have history from the inside so that you feel that you're experiencing with all of your senses what the characters are experiencing. So in terms of the women, the girls, the young women, the friendship, the care, the first idea of the mother tree that I have in the first poem, but the idea of care that in a forest, the trees actually communicate with each other and the roots use a form of communication. And there have been many people who've studied this. And that was one thing that attracted to me, was this sense of we venerated trees since the beginning of time. But why is that? And now science catches up and says, well, wait a minute, there is actually a way in which trees teach us something. They literally can teach us ways of caring for each other and for the world. And so that was where I began the idea, in the first poem that mentions the mother tree. And so the mother is not a character because she's already gone when the story starts, but she is a character because she's always with Lucille, in the sense that she accompanies Lucille through these journeys, and the trees that sing to her, and I don't want to give away everything that happens, have a lot to do with being accompanied by her mother. In terms of the things that are more officially the sisterhood of women like Jeanne Perez, who was the editor of La Voix des Femmes, and how they tried to, Grace Sanders talks about this in her book, White Glove, Black Nation, that they tried to cut across the class divides at a time where that was still very difficult to do. And some of them, like Hilda Williamson, who was a sculptor and wanted to open an art school for girls, and that inspires the idea of Lucille and Fifina opening their own school. They wanted to go into communities and use the arts as a way of bringing about change, social change. So this was going on in the 30s. And this is the kind of story that I feel is undertold when you hear stories told about Haiti. So it's a great question. And I feel like, I'm not even nibbling on the edges of it because it's such a juicy, meaty question. And I hope that I'll be able to come to the Congress and that we can have a panel with Yveline and with Edwidge and who else would like to be there and really address this, because it is an incredible story that is undertold. Again, I don't want to say untold because we have people telling our stories. It's that what gets through and what is amplified, that's what I hope to be, contributing to, not, claiming to say that what I'm saying is new. So
thank you, Nadine. So we're going to close out. We have 3 minutes. So we're going to end with Dr. Danny Mendez, this question. He had a comment, it's in English, and it says, Merci pour conversation ça. I don't know how you say beautiful in Creole, beauté. And he asked Nadine, est-ce que gon thread on fil? Is there a thread you wove in this novel that you would like to explore further in another project? Est-ce que gon fil que wap continue in a deuxième projet ou? And shout out to Danny, my Cornell buddy, and Dr. Sam, also Haitian woman, Cornell. So that's the closing question, Nadine.
wow. There absolutely is. And I don't know if I'll have the chance to do it, honestly, because the climate is, as we know, is so chilling, and it will, and I don't want to assume this, but there will be people who probably won't want to encourage our stories from being told, as we know, through book banning, through book challenging. So, I encourage everyone, wherever you are, if that's going on, that you do what you can to make sure that that doesn't continue. So everybody who's writing and who thinks, their work should have a place in the world, it's an uphill battle, especially telling stories where, quote unquote, we're making someone feel uncomfortable. I mean, part of art is making people feel uncomfortable. If you aren't, then maybe, it's entertainment, okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. But part of what I'm trying to do is make people reflect and think at the same time as they're enjoying. So I want the sense of pleasure, but I also want a sense of reflection. Maybe the thread would be if I could write another book, if I have that chance, I'd love to write about Fifina and Lucille, and then, see also how Oreste fit. Those three, I'd like to see what happens with them in the future, but who knows? Who knows? But thank you for that question.
Oh my gosh, Nadine, we did it. We actually finished on time. Won't we do it?
I can't believe that.
So for those of you at work, the coffee break is over.
What,
But
what
merci
about
you.
what about asking Nadine to read at least briefly? Yes.
Okay.
As we
Okay.
close out, c'est vrai.
Yes.
So I'm sorry. Yes, you did ask me, and you asked me to read Watched. Okay. Watched. I simply watched to offer. I simply wanted. Let me tell you what's going on here. So there is someone who's coming to visit Zora Neale Hurston, who is called Mamselle by Lucille, and Lucille is already working at Zora's house and for Zora, but this visitor comes, and this visitor shows up. He says, I simply wanted to offer my personal welcome to our beautiful country. You must know we Haitians are solicitous of our guests, especially those who voyage from such a great distance like yourself. His French is too perfect. all tight and polite and sharp as an ice pick. And you are indeed a guest in our country, he adds, flicking a piece of lint from his knee. He leans back in the wicker chair, pulls out a cigar. Would you like a drink? Asks Mademoiselle, glancing over at me. He ignores her offer and puffs his cigar. I hear you've taken a considerable interest in the case of a poor woman, he says. Which woman might that be? There are so many poor women in Haiti. Mademoiselle Hurston, let's not waste any more time. We know where you went and where you plan to go. Really, word must travel fast by Tijal. Isn't that the right expression in Creole for bush telegraph? Mademoiselle blows her cigarette smoke over her shoulder. Pesne crosses his legs, his creases so perfect. I have to hide my amazement. Ah, yes, you must mean my coming appointment with the esteemed Dr. Léon, your director of public health, who studied obstetrics in Europe. It gives me such pleasure to know how closely you follow my comings and goings. Do all the guests in your country get this kind of personal attention, or am I just lucky? I will take a drink, says Pesne, without looking at me.
That was beautiful. Patrick, thank you for recommending she read from her book. It was
Thank
beautiful.
you so much.
Well, thank you all. We respect your time and energy in the holiday. So bless you all. Thank you for being in community with us.
Thank you so much. Can't wait to read it.
Yes.
Thank you, Yveline. Thank you, everyone.
Mm,
Such a pleasure. I hope I'm going to meet people in person.
Yes.
See you. Now we're in Haiti. See you in Haiti.
April
Yeah.
2025.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thanks, sis.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Love y'all.
Hmm.
Okay. Bye, Gérard. Merci, oui.
It's great to see all you
Gérard, I want you to meet Nadine. Sorry, my lemon is on my mouth. Gérard was a protector of Eartha Pascal Touillot.
Oh, wow.
I met him in Cleveland. He's in Ohio with me.
He's in Ohio. Wow.
Oui, and comes to every Haitian event there is, and then some.
He's on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, Gérard, also mute.
Non, moi, parle pas de Madame Trouillot de mission, ça. C'est très intéressant. Un travail avec Barzat. Il y a un pile point qu'on touche là, très touchant. C'est les Madame Trouillot viennent dans le palais national, tout gros chef yo contre Haïti. Je dis côté ti, tout réel ça sorti, vient tomber là. So, un pile histoire. So, on va parler de ça, tout. So, enchanté de te reconnaître. À la prochaine.
Wow. Merci en pile.
OK. Merci. Bye.
Please stay warm.
Okay.
Merci. Bye.
Hi, Kathleen. Hi, Eric.
I love you, Evie.
Love you, cuz.
This is also Ohio. Love from Ohio. Lots of love.
My cousin, we grew up together.
That's
Her
great.
mom is my favorite person outside of my own mom and sister.
Well, you did such a great job. I just wanted to say, how natural it felt talking, like it really was a conversation. And I appreciate that because it's hard to do that virtually. But
Yeah.
I feel how you created this sense of, like we all felt in community. So
Thank you, Nadine.
Yes,
I'm
thank
so
you.
shocked that you and Patrick know each other, and then you
I
learn
know.
from Nelta Jackie Shanghai. Let me stop our recording. I'm so
Yes.